Thank you, Jill, and thanks everybody for joining us today. This month we wanted to talk a little bit about managing a hybrid workforce, the tools and policies you need for the sort of anytime, anywhere workplace. Just to give you some perspective about where we're coming from here. Back in, I guess, March 2020, when this all started with the pandemic, we already, as an IT company, whoops, I don't know why that happened. It always seems to happen. It just goes out of presentation mode for whatever reason. Anyway, we are, and it did it again. I don't know why it's doing this. GoToMeeting just doesn't want to let you guys see the presentation. Anyway, what I was saying is that when we started doing this, we already had people who were sort of working out of state, people, as a technology company, the idea of working remotely or sharing a screen or doing things like that, they weren't that foreign to us. And I think as a result, we were very fortunate that as everything happened with COVID, we were able to pivot pretty well. And even now, as people are starting to filter back in the office a little bit. I'm doing this presentation today from my office. We still have a very much hybrid organization. Some people like to come in a lot. Some people very little. Some never show up at all. And I imagine for a lot of you who are on the call, this is kind of the way things are. I mean, I don't know of too many businesses, especially office type businesses, where everyone's back in or everybody's remote. There's a lot of reasons for the hybrid model to dominate, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. As you might expect, for a presentation like this, we're not going to get through every possible thing we could possibly talk about. Please be sure to keep your questions in mind. Feel free to drop them in the chat. If you want to save them to the end, that's cool too. We're going to do a Q&A. And of course, feel free to contact us offline. My contact information is below, and we can answer some more personal questions. So without further ado, let's get started. So I guess I have a question for everybody. Does it feel like the workplace is the same as it was before? I mean, I know for me, it doesn't. I come in, a few times a week, and there are just less people. I mean, the thing is, things are just not quite the same, and I don't really feel like it'll ever be the same. Some businesses just never went back. I mean, we have clients, I think as a managed IT services provider, we have a little bit of an interesting perspective. We're entirely business to business, and we react to the way our clients operate. And so we had clients when this started where that was it for them, working in the office, period. And some people are completely remote. It's not everybody, but some. Most office jobs sort of became this hybrid work from home. Speaking for me personally, I usually come into the office Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, thereabouts, with some mixed stuff. But we also have people who don't come in at all or come in on different days. I think that's very typical. There's definitely an expectation now that many meetings are still going to happen virtually, such as account reviews, product trainings, et cetera. So what do I mean by that? A lot of things, I remember, especially starting off in business around 2005, 2006 out of college, it was pretty much the rule that when you had the opportunity to get FaceTime with a client and you could sit down in front of them, even if it was something minor. I remember I would go to visit people just to show them their firewall renewal or things that really only took a few minutes to resolve, that you would try to get these meetings done in person. The FaceTime was really important. And I feel like a lot of these casual meetings, the expectation is kind of shifting to, well, primarily they're going to be virtual, and we'll have the in-person meetings for things that really do require that person-to-person interaction. And so even if you're urging your people to come back into the office, I think there needs to be an expectation that we're going to be working with people who are not going to be physically in front of us. Employees and employers need more flexibility to accommodate personal and business interests. I mean, me personally, it hasn't been too big of an issue. I don't have kids, so I don't have to worry about daycare and things like that. But I know a lot of kids still haven't quite gone back to school, or if they have, it's in a limited capacity. They still need to arrange daycare stuff. I know daycare stuff has been harder to arrange just in general during the pandemic. I think there's just less resources for that. Not only that, I mean, with these demands from employees to have flexibility, there's also like a general business need to be available at different times of day. And so, just my perspective, every so often I'll be working, 7, 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, working on a document because that's when the time allows. I've done meetings with clients that are during the evenings and things like that because their busy schedule, their new reality because they have to take their kid to school in the morning or watch something, or they work certain days of the week, requires me to be flexible. And so I think if we're going to ask employees to be flexible and put, you know, odd hours in or do stuff, and at the same time they want their own personal flexibility, we kind of have to have a hybrid situation. My view is we need to reconsider what the workplace should be moving forward, regardless of what we wish it could be. There's been a lot of people who say, I can't wait to bring everybody back and get back to the way things were before. I think we need to become more comfortable with the idea that that's just the past. And we need to think about what the best thing is for us to operate as opposed to our previous biases of what the workplace should be. So the agenda today, first we're going to talk about why the hybrid work model is poised to dominate. I alluded a little bit to that stuff a few moments ago in the intro, but it just seems like this is the way things are going to be moving forward. Maintaining continuity with mixed work locations and styles. So, I mean, I think this is maybe the most important subject and probably what brings most people into this webinar today, which is how do you balance this sort of flexibility in terms of styles of work with the actual need of keeping people productive. You know, there's no denying that when you can have everybody in one room at one time at 9 a.m. for your group meeting, that you can get their attention and control what they have. But when we lack that kind of cohesiveness and expectation, what can we do? What kind of business practices can we take to preserve that continuity and make it that even if we are in different locations, even if we do have to work at different times and shift everything we do, how can we keep being productive? I feel like at DP Solutions, we've done a really good job at this, and so maybe we can help you. Tools to keep road warriors and those working from home productive. You know, I don't think it should be lost that if you're going to work in this sort of flexible environment, you need to have all the tools and equipment necessary. And, you know, just a spoiler alert, you know, if you're in August 2021 and you don't have a decent quality microphone or headphones or a webcam, you're kind of falling behind. Security policies to address the new way of working. So when we have people working in one centralized location between the hours of 9 and 5 or whatever your typical work hours are, it's pretty easy to identify an attack surface, identify how people work, where data flows within a closed space. But now when the workspace is pretty much anytime, anywhere, we need to shift our security approach. And then, of course, Q&A. You know, everything, I'm going to talk about the stuff I'm thinking of here, but I'm sure you guys are coming in with all sorts of thoughts and concerns that I may not be aware of. So first, why will the hybrid model dominate? I mean, I think I'm not the only person who believes this. I mean, you can Google it. I think a lot of people think we're never quite going back to the 40-hour typical in-office work week. Technology has removed the workflow obstructions of remote work. In 2010 or so, which isn't exactly the dark ages when it comes to technology, there were some serious constraints to allowing us to work the way we work now. I mean, even a 720p, which is a HD low-end webcam, was a lot more expensive. I'm using right now a USB microphone that has like a little pop filter and a high-quality microphone on it and things like that. This device was a lot more expensive. Laptops were more expensive. We were still in the early era of tablets. You know, I believe the iPad was right around that sort of 2010 period. And not everybody was using them, and the app marketplace was so limited. So you can really use some of these tools to work full-time remotely. Today, in 2021, everybody has a smartphone. Tablets are ubiquitous. Laptops are ubiquitous. Even the small pieces of electronics like a microphone, like a webcam, are easily obtained and usually for very low prices. Not just that, we are in a situation right now where the cloud is where most small businesses and medium-sized businesses manage their data. And all this cloud and software as a service stuff is cohesive to the idea of working anytime, anywhere. If we're going to take all the servers out of our office and we're going to put all our data in the Microsoft cloud or Amazon's cloud, or we're going to use QuickBooks Online or this ERP that's hosted remotely, why do I necessarily need to be in my office to address that client need? Why can't I work on this thing when I'm traveling, across the country or something like that? Employees demand flexibility and are being recruited based on work-life flexibility post-COVID. So I think this is critical. I think perhaps the idea of the Great Resignation is a little overblown. You may have heard about this online, the idea that everybody's going to quit and get their new jobs now that COVID is ending or whatever, or shifting, I guess you should say. It's not really ending. And that may be true to some extent. I think everybody's seeing people have pressure to keep employees. But those people who resign, they go to work somewhere else. And for everybody who does their Great Resignation, there's a great hiring on the other side. And a lot of times people are making these shifts based on lifestyle issues. We had people I know here who decided it was time for a shift in scenery. They just don't live in Maryland anymore, or they needed a job that provided them benefits or flexibility that somebody else couldn't provide. And people are recruiting based on this. And so if you come in and you're telling your staff, well, we're going to be in the office 40 hours a week, 9 to 5, and you're expected to be here, and we don't offer this kind of flexibility, you may have a hard time recruiting people. And so whether or not you want to have people working remotely, you may have to just to be able to find talent. Culturally, I think the idea of remote work has been gradually accepted. There definitely was a lot of resistance to the idea of remote work. I think a lot of people who were resistant to it or maybe on the fence about it, after you do this for 18 months and things work, those opinions, those biases shift a little bit. Obviously, remote work is not perfect for everything, but we've sort of proven that we can accomplish this and achieve some level of productivity doing certain tasks remotely. And it's hard to go back to somebody and say, hey, that thing that you've been doing successfully and you were productive doing the last 18 months, forget about it, come back now. I think it just doesn't make sense as a message. While work from home has been productive for many, we still need this in-person interaction. So keep in mind the whole idea of the hybrid model is that it's anytime, anywhere, and that anytime, anywhere includes the office during regular business hours. I know how I feel about it and how my emotions and stress and productivity go, which is there are times where I'm definitely great working remotely. If I'm working on like this presentation today, or if I'm running phishing tests or something like that, I don't really need the office space to be productive and get engaged on. However, when I'm trying to push forth a new initiative or introduce a product into the DP Solutions mix, and I need people from different departments, or I need to actually demonstrate somebody or work on a document together, sometimes just being in person helps for those sorts of things. And so I think when you give people the flexibility to work remotely, you will get their buy-in when you say, hey, I need you in here for this specific task. So we should kind of look at the hybrid model as a way to balance both the productivity needs of the employer and the flexibility needs of the employee and the employer, I guess I should say. Pivoting now, I want to talk about continuity and cohesion. Flexibility is good, but it can make work more difficult when people aren't in the same location. How can we address this concern? You're going to have to manage this challenge moving forward. The first thing is to stagger schedules. There's some interesting studies that you can look into right now about preferences when it comes to working remotely. I did my own informal study here at DP Solutions, which is, I come in on Mondays a lot in the office, and that's just sort of what I do. My feeling was if I'm going to work remotely, the Tuesdays and Thursdays were good. I like to mix up my commute. I'm very much a variety is the spice of life kind of person, and so coming in Monday was no big deal for me. And I have to tell you, when I come in on Mondays, there are definitely a lot less people. Most people don't want to come into the office on Mondays. I guess I'm not all that surprised. But what you need to do in order to balance and create cohesion is there has to be kind of a stagger. You need to have people who are willing to come in Monday and people who are willing to come in Friday, because most people are going to want to do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, statistically speaking. Obviously, that's going to vary based on the person, the organization, how many people. But what you want to have is some coverage all the time. And you definitely want to have people who come in that have a sort of a work relation together. It doesn't necessarily matter, for example, that I'm here at the same time, perhaps our accounting department is here. Myself and the accounting department, there's not a whole lot that we do with each other on a day-to-day basis. But it is good that me and Jill have some FaceTime together, because Jill and I, as you might tell, do so much work. And so us making sure that our schedules overlap at least a little bit in the office helps us stay productive. I hope that makes sense. Have a mix of in-person and virtual meetings. I think the virtual meetings can be good when they are short, relatively speaking. And I say short, an hour or less. And they have a specific agenda that's followed. They can be really good if you want to display or share something, right? One of the big benefits of virtual meetings, for me at least, is I don't have to print 50 docs. I can just bring it up on my screen and show people, and then make edits in real time, and then highlight stuff and do all these sorts of things. That's really nice. But for the in-person stuff, if I'm going to have a longer meeting, maybe I have to create a new policy. Having people together, looking at them, not get sort of eye strain from having to stare at a monitor the whole time. The ability to get up and say, hey, let's take a quick break and use the restroom, or I'm going to go get another coffee. Those kinds of meetings are really good for in-person. I think a mix really, really helps. Check-in calls. If you have a group of people who are working remotely, you're staggering them, whatever you're doing, I think it's important for department heads to have little check-ins. And it could just be the first thing, 8:30, we do at 8:30, 8:45 a.m. What's going on today? What are your roadblocks? What are your challenges? And this is just a way for people to touch base with one another. I may, Karen Shell, the president of the company, my boss, she and I may not spend a whole lot of time talking to each other on a particular day. She's got a lot of stuff going on, and so do I. But we do have our check-in call in the morning, and we do go over what's going on for the day. And if there's something I need to tell Karen, I can tell her right there and then. I would really encourage that for your team. Events in the office. People want to feel purpose when they come to the office. When they come in to do this in-person stuff, there needs to be meaning. I know how I feel driving on 695 in the traffic. It's not exactly a awe-inspiring experience to sit in traffic. But at least when you know that there was an end game to it, well, we're having our company cookout today, or we're going to have this really neat thing, or maybe around Halloween you have a costume party or whatever. Maybe I'm not the best person to talk about this stuff, but the idea is that to create some kind of excitement, give people a reason to want to be in the office. It's really important to be fair, and that policies should be equitable. So obviously, based on work role, it's not always going to be super easy to make it 100% even Steven for everyone. Just to give an example, our purchasing people, our receiving people need to be here at certain times in our office when we get big shipments of devices. Hold on one second. Excuse me, I just need a sip of water. But there should be some consideration for the people who have to make the bigger sacrifices. If there are people who are resistant to working remotely, who just want to come in all the time, I know some people don't like that remote thing, remote stuff. It may be a good idea to just encourage them to do a little bit of remote work, so it doesn't seem like they are somehow trying to get ahead by being in the office more, stuff like that. We should always try to be equitable whenever possible. Establish ground rules for boundaries, response times, and other general work expectations. So if you chew out a person the first time you send them a message on Teams or give them a phone call and they don't answer, and they call you back and they say, yeah, my aunt just died or something, or one time somebody called me and I missed their call, and the reason I missed their call is that my cat got sick in the living room. I wasn't trying to miss their call. It was just that something came up and I had to address it. People need to know when they need to be available. If they miss a call, how long they have to return that call. What's the expectation for response time for specific high urgency things, or maybe for less urgent things, and just the general work expectations. And that way people won't flip out if there are minor inconveniences. If someone's not available for a few minutes, they don't blow up. They think, oh, well, just call me back, because that's what the policy says. Encourage documentation. So whenever there's something that we need to have in place, a procedure, a policy, something noteworthy, a big change for the business, whatever it is, it really should be documented. And so, review it with your team, do a virtual meeting, do an in-person meeting where you go over, for example, I want to change at DP Solutions the way we submit things to a certain meeting. So I'm going to have a meeting to go over our changes and communicate it, but I'm also just going to put this in writing and get acknowledgement on it. And the reason is that I don't have the unreasonable expectation that the first time I tell people how to submit stuff for this meeting, they're just going to do everything I say and get it right 100% the first time. That's just not how people work, especially with all these distractions working remotely. So documentation is really important. I would strongly encourage that. And then finally, and maybe the most important here, is feedback. How are you doing? How's this working for you? Are you okay coming to the office this way? What's working well for you? What's not working so well for you? We need to know how this experience is going for people, and not be willing to, and be willing to adjust our plans and not have any sacred cows, so to speak. Excuse me. Tools for the hybrid worker. Everybody who's working remotely probably needs some very basic things. Audio visual equipment. So I bring it up over and over again because I'm a real stickler for this. Maybe it's because I do presentations all the time. But I like to have a nice quality microphone that doesn't give up a lot of echo, that doesn't pick up external noises, that has some direction to it. I like it when, I'm talking to someone and if my cat is in the dining room meowing at me, that people can't necessarily hear that. You don't want the situation where you are using a microphone and because you're not wearing headphones, the audio from your computer speakers is feeding back into the microphone, creating that echo that everybody hates. And if you maybe are in a room where the little webcam built into your laptop just gives you a really grainy, dark picture, maybe go out and spend 20, 30, 40 bucks on a very basic USB webcam to get a nice, clean view. If you're doing enough of these meetings, I just think you have to have it. It's a small investment, but it's totally worth it. I mean, I spent more than a small investment. I spent, I think, $80 on my microphone and something like $50 on my camera. And I use my headphones are just little earbuds from a phone. But I was willing to spend the money on it because I use it so much. I'd really encourage it. Ergonomics. When you're working, people who are working from home or remotely or whatever, you need to be comfortable doing your work. People who might be working remotely, they may need things like standing desks or just a laptop in general or a tablet. They might need a keyboard that suits their hands a little bit better other than the laptop keyboard that's a little constrained. Just think about how people work and the fatigue that they have and see if you can incorporate ergonomics into it. SaaS-based email messaging collaboration. So I say SaaS-based because I really don't think these servers internally make a lot of sense for it. We use here at the office the Microsoft suite, Office 365, Teams, we use SharePoint, etc. We use the Microsoft Planner, etc. And it really works well for us. We can stay in touch with one another. You don't have to use that. You can certainly use Google if you're more into the Google suite. But the beauty of these SaaS-based products is that they are so well integrated with browsers, with mobile devices, any computer, etc. And you can really have that anytime, anywhere communication, really no matter where you are on the planet. I mentioned a couple options here. Whiteboarding apps, another nice thing to have if you want to draw or demonstrate something. There's a lot of good, cheap apps out there for that. Everyone should have, I think this goes without saying, a mobile device, iOS or Android. Makes sense. I mean, there are other ones out there, but these are the mainstream ones. Device user monitoring and management, including remote management. So we need to have tools on the devices that people are using so that these things can be secured, that people have the proper rights levels, that patches get applied, that they have all the applications on that they need, including security tools such as endpoint detection, antivirus, anti-malware, maybe any logging tools that you have, whatever. You need to have some kind of device management on those devices that people are working on remotely. Also, those remote workers, whatever we have, we should be able to touch these devices and install things, do a screen connect, whatever it is remotely. One of the reasons we've been able to operate during the pandemic without necessarily having to get everybody physically in the same place is that if somebody has a problem with their computer, we can use our remote tools to work on the issue right away, assuming they have connectivity. Lastly, and I call this a tool, but it's really a security requirement, is multi-factor authentication. With everybody working remotely and accessing things from different devices, different locations, different internet connections, etc., this is very flexible for the user. They can do a lot of things at once. However, this flexibility also allows bad guys, if they can find out wherever your portal is, where that point of entry is into your email or your contact solution or your document management solution, they're basically a login away from having access to all of your data. The best way to combat this is multi-factor authentication. Simply put, a username and password is insufficient to protect an account and keep it secure. You need that token, something that you have that nobody else has, to make sure that when your people are working remotely, that you know it's them and not somebody else. If you don't have multi-factor authentication incorporated into your technology right now, you're behind, to put it bluntly, and I think you need to start moving on it now, and we'd be happy to have a discussion with you about it. Security policies. So first is acceptable use. So the rules of engagement have changed with people working anytime, anywhere. People need to understand that if they're, for example, bringing home a work laptop to work remotely, that device is for work purposes only. It's not to be given to a kid to do their homework on or play a game on or any of that other stuff. This is a work device. Similarly, you want to talk about other sort of acceptable use procedures that if you are working remotely, this is what is expected of you, so on and so forth. The policy itself has always been out there. I mean, there have always been policies that say these are the terms of engagement with technology and what you're allowed to do at the workplace. It's just that the acceptable use policy needs to speak to what people are actually doing right now, and a lot of people haven't changed their acceptable use policies. Sensitive data policy. With all of this data traveling from the office to someone's home, to someone's mobile device, to an airport, to a hotel, to a cloud solution, whatever, it's more important than ever that we use a classification to define what data is sensitive to our organization, why it's important, and the risks associated with it, along with what you're allowed to do in terms of handling of that data. If somebody's working at their home and they're working on some particularly sensitive stuff on a work laptop, they need to know that because this data is sensitive, they are not to allow people to eavesdrop on it. They are not allowed to, for example, copy it to a USB drive and work on it on their own personal device that is not company managed, so on and so forth. If you haven't defined what your sensitive data is and how it's to be handled and used and stored and all that stuff, you really need to get on that. Incident reporting. Do people know how to report on issues regardless of where they are and who they're reporting to? So now more than ever, people need to know how to find what they need based on whatever day of the week it is or whatever the incident is. If somebody's working remotely, something bad happens security-wise, and they don't know who to communicate with, the damage can get worse. And even when people are working remotely, they still need to escalate security issues and incidents as soon as possible. They just may need to do it in a different way than they were doing it when they were in the office full-time, or remote full-time for that matter. Bring your own device. So we need to make sure people know what is our organization's policy on using personal devices within the organization. Are we an organization that uses mobile device management and other tools to take personal devices, put some security tools on it, put some management on it so that these devices can be used safely, that we can make sure that if that client's data is protected, that if an employee leaves, that data is wiped from the device, so on and so forth? Or are we taking a more aggressive approach where we say, okay, you're only allowed to use company devices that are issued to you, and there is no bring your own device policy. You have to use company devices, or maybe something in between. Really important to have these things among others. All of these policies require more attention to acknowledgement and documentation. So I bring that up because once we have these policies documented, you may be sending these policies off to somebody you're never going to see in the office. You don't want someone just clicking off a checkbox when this policy is submitted to them. People need to know that the sensitive data policy that the organization has come up with is sacred, and that they have to follow it. They have to acknowledge it, that there's consequences to the employee if they do not follow the policy, and that they're going to be held accountable to it. So they better read it. Otherwise, when something bad happens, that's going to be held against them for their job, and you know, in certain situations would justify termination if they don't follow it. So to wrap it up real quick, you know, I want to have about a half hour. You know, our hybrid work is what we can expect moving forward. I just don't see us going back to work full time in the office the way things were. There are just too many variables pushing us away from that, and it's going to be really, really hard to ask people who have been working successfully remotely to give all that up. It just doesn't seem viable to me. Most organizations have adopted a hybrid model in some way and are learning to adjust. I don't think that's that crazy. I think some, you know, the looking back at the last year and a half or so, it's been so crazy. You know, you had, I think, this expectation that we were going to be remote for a short period, and then in the summer we're going to drive everybody back. But obviously, you've seen we've gone through these waves, and now I think the new normal is anytime, anywhere. Your teams won't succeed in the hybrid world if we haven't given them the right tools. So, you know, if you're asking people to work remotely, but you haven't created the workflow, policies, procedures, technology, et cetera, to make them successful at their jobs, don't expect good results. On the flip side, if you do all these things, you could not only have good results, you may have better results than you had when you were working full-time in the office, because now you have happier people who have more flexibility and more options. Who are going to put in better hours. Maybe they put in even more hours because you've given them that flexibility. But it's up to us as managers to put them in a position to succeed. So, and security planning must be re-examined. If we're not working the same way, we can't look at our security as the same as it once was. So that's it. Now we'll take your questions. I don't know if there's any in the chat right now. I'm going to plug a couple things while we gather questions. First, you know, normally in this slot, I'm sitting here plugging next month's webinar, and I will do that. We're going to talk, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to talk about security awareness training, phishing testing, et cetera, next month, sort of where those things stand in 2021. It's a subject near and dear to my heart. I manage DP Solutions phishing testing and security awareness training program for our clients, and I have a lot of thoughts on this, how things need to change, how you need to address security awareness with your staff. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that. But even more importantly, the next Thursday, Thursday, September 30th, between 3 and 7 p.m., we are having our 50th anniversary celebration here with all sorts of fun stuff. You can see the details there. We've got a link. Feel free to go to the link, and we're looking forward to having you join us. It'll all be done, of course, safely with health and care in mind. But yeah, the webinar for next month, normally I try and schedule the webinars for the last Wednesday of the month. Next month's webinar will be on the 22nd. Again, more details will go out. I'll have a landing page, all that stuff. We just didn't want to have the webinar right before the event. We didn't want it to be too crowded. Anyway, that's it. Contact information's on the screen. Jill, any questions from the audience?
Yes, Ben, we do have a couple that came in. First question, how do you recommend approaching contractors who need access on their own devices? Thinking MDM, install issues, support, liability, etc.
That is a great question. If you have a third party that is trying to access your stuff, they want to have access to your data, there are two approaches to this. One is you hand off the data to them, right? You say, here's a little, you know, just like you would, you know, if you think about it like sending a package in the mail, right? When you send a package in the mail from one person to the other, once it gets to them, it's their problem. They have to secure it. You could say, well, we're sharing you this information, and we have an agreement that you're going to take certain precautions to protect this information. Another approach would be, and I think this is kind of what the question was alluding to, is here's access into our system. We're creating a sandbox for you to play in. And under that sandbox, you have these rights to access these things. This is a little risky, obviously, because now once you've given somebody the keys to the door, if you will, they can do a lot of damage. So first of all, you have to limit user rights. These guests, these contractors or whatever they are, can't have full admin rights. They can't even have the rights that you would give a normal employee. They should have rights that are limited to what they need to complete their work. Secondly, there needs to be requirements on the devices they're using to come in with, right? If they say, yeah, we want to access your environment to do all this stuff, and let's use all these Windows XP computers to do it, that's not cool. That's not a good idea. We don't want that to happen. As far as specific solutions to this is really, really going to vary. And I mean, the principles I'm talking about, I think those principles apply no matter what. The way this is going to be specifically implemented for you is going to vary based on what these third parties need to access, how they need to access it, what devices they have available to access it, compliance and security concerns for the data. You know, if the data we're talking about they're accessing is, for example, PCI compliant or CFMC compliant or HIPAA compliant or whatever, the solution will vary. So it is kind of a loaded question, and I would say definitely worthy of a follow-up and perhaps even some engineering.
Okay, great. Next question that came in. Do you have guidance for gauging employee productivity when they work more reactively, such as assistants?
Such as assistants. So I guess I want to make sure I understand the question. So I guess the question is, if you have like a personal assistant type thing, is that what we're getting at?
Someone who's more of a reactive employee, how can you gauge their productivity? Right.
It's very difficult. So, you know, there's different ways to look at this. First are the actual things that you can easily measure, you know, how many emails they sent out in a day, how many, you know, here at DP Solutions, for example, we can measure our service desk, which is a very reactive thing, right? You know, people who call in to our service desk needing support, we can look at how fast they close their tickets and how many tickets they closed and how fast they responded to a phone call or an email or something like that. We can measure those things. We have tools in place that actually gather statistics on that. That may or may not be viable for what you do. What I would do is I would take the expectations of the employee, say these are the, you know, maybe the 10 or so responsibilities they have, find out within each of those responsibilities what may actually be measurable. Because I know some things may be difficult to measure. You know, let's say you're a receptionist, and one of your goals is to have a big smile on your face every time comes to the door. I don't think I have a measurement for that, but there are things we can do to sort of capture some of that information. This kind of goes back also to check-in calls. So if I had an employee like a personal assistant, and I wasn't in the same location as they were, but I wanted to make sure they were staying on top of things, I might have them do some kind of check-in with me, beginning of the day, end of the day. I think the idea of, you know, timesheets or whatever documentation that summarizes a person's day is a good thing, where they say, hey, this is what I'm working on today. These are the 5 things I want to get done. At the end of the day, they say, these were the things I tried to get done, but these are the things that popped up in the meantime, that they're required to document that. Another thing you could do, this is something I like to do both personally for productivity, but also to show some transparency about where my time goes. You can have people put time on their, you know, like a shared, on an Outlook calendar that you have access to. So people can see, for example, that on Wednesday that I get in around 8:30, that I have my huddle call at 8:45, that we have our management meeting at 9:30. The webinar was I was preparing for at 10:30 and then presented at 11. That at 2 o'clock I have a client call, and at 3 o'clock I have a meeting. I don't think there's going to be much question about how productive I am today, because I've really put all this stuff out there. I've made it transparent. What may work for you will probably be different. I tend to focus on the work and the task that needs to be done first, and then work back from there and find things that are measurable. But without knowing the specific situation, that's probably all I could speak to right now.
Okay, great. I think that helps. Next question. How do you approach help desk staffing when users can work 24/7, but you don't have the capability to provide help desk 24/7?
I try very hard No, that's another great question. So at DP Solutions, just to give a little transparency, we have general hours and then we have on-call hours. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the general hours are 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and that's when we have people staff taking calls. And then during the on-call hours, we have people waiting for calls and who respond maybe a little, they're not sitting at a phone waiting for a call, but they get the alerts and stuff to take those emergencies that happen at like 2 in the morning. As you might expect, we get more calls during the day than we do, during these, off hours. We do get them, but we don't get them as often, which is why we have the on-call thing. We have a resource set up for it, but we don't, dedicate as many resources. It's always a challenge. It's a challenge, especially when you have people who work internationally, who their normal hours are off hours. But we try and judge it. We also look at things like the metrics. So when are we getting the calls in? Do we have enough resources at a specific time? Are the tickets backing up? Do they have the right skill sets for those particular office hours? It totally depends. And by the way, I mean, we want to be a company for everybody. But if it's 2 in the morning and you have and you're the type of person who needs tons and tons of responses all the time, you may need a personal IT guy that works for you on that kind of schedule. There may be places where we don't suit it. So it's a real challenge. It's something we're always addressing, and it's something we're always willing to change as well. I also think this speaks to why I brought it up earlier, the idea of employee-employer flexibility. Both the employee and the employer wants flexibility. Service desk people, help desk people, they have the same personal concerns that everybody has. And so if I want somebody to be on call for something, then I need to give them flexibility to say, not have to come into the office every day or get other sort of consideration. And so it's an ongoing challenge. It's something we're always trying to address. I think we're pretty successful at it, though. We don't have a lot of issues with people saying, I had this issue in the middle of the night and it caused this big problem because you guys weren't available. It's just not a thing that happens. It's something we've had to balance well before the pandemic happened. So I hope that answers your question. If you have a particular situation you're concerned with, we're happy to talk with you about it.
Okay, great. Reading our next question. Are you seeing duplicate workstations set up for in-office and home office? For example, your users have dual monitors, so now 4 monitors are needed to support both the hybrid setup.
That's a totally personal type thing. I'll give you some transparency about what I do. So I have my work laptop in the office, and on my desk I have 2 monitors and a little dock. And that way I can have the laptop monitor and 2 other monitors set up. I'm looking at my middle monitor now, which has the presentation that you guys are seeing, as well as on the side, I have a little notes thing so I can see what I need to talk about, as well as another monitor up, which just has Teams up right now. That works really well for me. Not everybody needs that. At my home, I have I use my personal desktop. I have a nice big desktop computer, not a laptop. And I've got since everything's cloud-based, I can access pretty much everything I want to from that desktop without having to do a whole lot of work. That really works well for me. I am not afraid of allowing mobile device management or other device management on my personal devices. I think it's a good thing. I know a lot of people get a little touchy about that stuff, but these are security tools. They're not stealing your privacy. They're not stealing your information. They're there to install patches and do stuff like that. That works for me. That may not work for you. It may not be legal or compliant to do what I do for you, depending on the type of work you do. I tend to operate from the idea of, let's talk about the individual. What kind of work do they need to do on a day-to-day basis? What are the tasks they need to do from home? And let's give them the tools they need from there. I think a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, we're in such a situation right now where everything is anytime, anywhere, personal, customizable, etc. And I just think like the idea of everyone's going to get 2 laptops, one for their office, one for their home, with 2 monitors and stuff, it just doesn't make sense. Let's just give people what they want to work and go from there. Just my 2 cents. Again, like anything else with technology, what works for me or what works for you is not going to work for the other guy. We should really look at these things and use good principles to make good decisions.
Okay. We had another question come in. We created a certain set of hotel cubes for full-time teleworkers, and the full-time workers lose their personal cube. Have scheduling software to schedule the hotel cubes.
Okay, I'm not.
I think the question is, is there a scheduling software so that people can book the cubicles to work on?
Oh, okay. So if the question is like juggling calendars and booking stuff.
Right, booking like a workspace,
Yeah,
sounds like.
okay. So offhand, I don't have, my guess is yes. I don't know offhand of a specific application for like booking spaces and things within an office. I would almost assuredly guess that something exists. There may also be something within like maybe a SharePoint site or something like that, where you could probably customize something fairly easily that could do this. I would want to talk to a SharePoint developer about that. It's just not my expertise. Another thing you could do, this is something that we do with our conference rooms. You can, what we do is we create calendars for office spaces. This kind of works for us because we have just a conference room, a training room, and a small conference room. So that, for example, if you want to book the conference room for 9:30 a.m., you not only send the request to the individuals for the meeting, but you also send the request to the conference room itself. And if that room is booked, the room rejects you. So this could be like a cubicle space, right? And you say, this is a thing, and it could be cubicle 1. And you say, oh, I'm going to work in cubicle 1 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I send the calendar thing up and it says, oh, nope. Friday, cubicle 1 is already, you sent the thing to cubicle 1 and it's already booked by Joe or something like that. That's a way to do it. I gotta think that that somebody created an app to do this. I just think it probably exists. I just don't know of it offhand.
Yeah, we can certainly do some more research, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Looks like that's all the questions that have come through. So some good questions, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, some really good questions. You guys really pushed me. Keep them coming. Anyway, well, thanks everybody for joining us. Really appreciate it. This will be on the website as usual. Please attend the future webinars. Check out the anniversary celebration. Reach out to me via email or contact me on LinkedIn if you want to talk after the webinar. Happy to do that. And yeah, have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.